This is Opinionated with Danica to Giorgio.
Hello and welcome to the show. Coming up tonight, the ABC doubles down on its Gina Rinehart segment by comparing her to Jabba the Hutt and then offers an apology. Does this taxpayer-funded organisation have any self-awareness? A UN's women's basketball player dares to suggest that biological men should not compete in women's sports, prompting panic in the WNBA as coaches desperately spread a message of inclusivity. Sal Grover joins the show later on. And in the debrief, I'll play you a clip of comments I made on this network that activist group Get Up is now using in a social media ad, and I'll expose the irony of it. You won't want to miss it. But first tonight, it's taken 4 weeks, a discussion with its ombudsman and the threat of legal action for the ABC to finally issue a public apology to mining magnate Gina Rinehart after the disgusting and vile segment on its Race Around the World segment. And yet the public broadcaster still insists it did not break editorial guidelines.
Ultimately, we felt the treatment of Ms Rinehart was not fair, and so we apologised and we've edited it and changed the program.
So the ABC issues an apology, yet published an essay which draws comparisons between Gina Rinehart and the fictional Star Wars gangster Jabba the Hutt. The piece debated whether the segment calling for viewers to sodomise her was actually a reference to her weight. This is sick. And a reminder, we pay $1.2 billion a year for this. Here's News24 contributor James Bolt.
The world's most drawn-out own goal is finally over. The ABC has apologised for that Gina Rinehart murder sketch. Now, I suppose some solace for soccer players is when they put the ball in their own net. It's done in an instant. You know, they're not forced to watch the ball roll closer to the line over the course of a week. But not ABC management. They signed themselves up for a painstakingly slow march towards an apology by insisting they would stay silent until an ombudsman's review told them whether positive descriptions of violent murder are bad. Which was always a bizarre thing to insist, right? Because what great truth would that review reveal that we don't know already? I mean, are we to believe that ABC management were completely unable to decide for themselves whether it's appropriate for their network to broadcast this? And that so unsure themselves were ABC management about that clip, they outsourced all moral authority on the matter to an ombudsman. Now, if that is the case, the ABC needs new management. If taxpayers like you and me are going to fund a media empire, and that media empire is going to insist that it's an unbiased source of news and entertainment, then its management should be able to make simple calls like, we should apologise for calling for someone's stick-related murder. It's not the hardest call to make. In fact, it's pretty surprising that the Ombudsman needed several days to mull over the issue. You know, I suppose like Ombudsman internal reviews usually take a bit longer than a few days, but this is a special case, right? Because what we found out this week is that this sketch was so disgusting that you didn't even need to watch it in order for you to know that it needed to be apologised for. Because here's how bad things got for the ABC. The least apologetic man in Canberra thought the broadcaster needed to apologise.
It is not appropriate. It should not have aired. And the ABC should take appropriate action. But, you know, no Australian, even an Australian I profoundly disagree with, like Mrs Rinehart, should be subject to that sort of commentary.
So let me say something that in a functioning society would get me thrown off television in a second. The ABC should have listened to Chris Bowen. Bowen should have been the voice of moral authority the ABC needed. Because here's what's happened. The best time to apologise to Gina Rinehart was immediately. The worst time is after an internal ombudsman needed to have a look at it for you to figure out if murder is bad.
Yeah, we got something from Bowen, but where's the Prime Minister? Nowhere, as always. Well, isn't Labor scared of the threat of one nation more than ever? Immigration Minister Tony Burke was set to unveil the party's big immigration policy this week at the National Press Club, but cancelled it.
Tony Burke arrogantly booked in a National Press Club address to announce a new policy which he had not yet got Cabinet approval for. He took it to Cabinet on Monday. He got rolled at Cabinet by his colleagues, who forced him to cancel his speech on Thursday in a public humiliation of the Minister for Home Affairs because he hadn't done the work and it wasn't yet ready to be publicly announced.
Talk about a choke. Gemma Tognini from GT Communications has more.
In case you missed it, Immigration Minister Tony Burke this week cancelled, at the 11th hour I might add, his scheduled address to the National Press Club. It's been widely reported that he was going to outline policy changes described as contentious within the Labor Party, but couldn't get consensus within Cabinet in time to deliver his speech. Labor can't even agree internally how to solve the problem, and it is a problem. Back in May, for example, it was reported that net migration will grow by just shy of 1 million people over the next 4 financial years. That's more than 55,000 extra migrants per year than the government previously admitted. And that's just a snapshot, just one of many that points to a bigger story of an unchecked, out-of-control approach to immigration that simply cannot be sustained. Housing, hospitals, schools, infrastructure, the pressure is relentless, and the government hasn't got a plan, at least not one that it can agree on. It also refuses to learn from other countries. It's been well documented that after slashing immigration numbers, rental properties, for example, became cheaper and more available in both Canada and New Zealand. That's just a couple of examples. There are many. A big part of this problem is that it's been very hard in this country to have an honest conversation about immigration without being shut down. We've got a political class allergic to hard conversations and an academic and socialist movement that responds to everybody that it disagrees with the word racist. So let me make it easy, because really it is easy. Questions like, what skills does Australia need to thrive? And what volume of people with those skills do we need to bring in? How can we stop the system from being gamed? What values do people hold, and how can we ensure that they align with established Australian values of freedom of faith, gender, sexuality and the like? Living in Australia is a privilege. It's not wrong to raise the bar high. Living in this country is like winning the golden ticket, and this government just flogs it off cheap. My late father came to Australia on a boat as a 10-year-old kid, and he never stopped being grateful for the life our little family was able to build here over time. I know I'm not alone, and I know so many of you share that story, the migrant story, which is part of Australia's great and wonderful heritage. And there's no reason for that to change if we get it right.
And we have to get it right, because we can't get Aussies into homes. Migration has impacted cost of living. We don't have the infrastructure for it. And Labor has no spine on this. It's too busy trying to save seats in places like Western Sydney. Well, whatever happened to integrity in this country? The former Victorian Allen government was ultimately brought down, among a myriad of things, over links to allegedly corrupt unions such as the CFMEU. New Premier Ben Carroll claims he will have a royal commission. Well, too little too late. Former New South Wales Police Minister David Elliott has this editorial on union standards.
You're going to laugh at this, because I may be a Liberal Party member of 40 years standing, but both my dear departed grandfathers were lifelong trade union members, including various stints as organisers. I can see them now looking down on me in my blue tie, scratching their respective foreheads and wondering, where did we go wrong? Well, Pop, I'll tell you where you went wrong. As a young bloke in my gap year, I got a job on a construction site when the union had decided one sunny Friday afternoon that because there was no salt in the meal room, that was a good excuse for a strike. Everybody out. That's right, I was denied an afternoon's wages because a whole bunch of middle-aged blokes wanted an early mark to go to the pub. Needless to say, I wasn't in a position to forfeit those wages, but I just had to cop it. So, just like how angry Middle Australia is now infuriated at mainstream politics to the point that they are looking to an untested and untried political movement in the shape of one nation, I was a working class kid from Western Sydney who decided that Labor just wasn't for me. Enter John Howard and the Building and Construction Commission. Finally, after decades of graft and corruption, the building unions were to be held to account. Who can forget those weekly announcements of investigations and inquiries which kept us all so entertained and reassured in the cause for natural justice? And the broader union movement was quietly relieved too. No more did they have to be the butt of jokes about lazy union officials using members' money to fund long lunches, bikie gangs and hookers. Finally, decent-minded and conscientious shop stewards could return to the diligent work of improving working conditions for employees. Australian workplaces had matured. We'd come of age, and even Labor luminaries like Chris Minns and Martin Ferguson were using a post-union narrative regarding the future of the Labor Party. But, like a bad penny, COVID-19, and a needy ex-girlfriend, the poor behaviour just wouldn't go away. So here we are again, more than 2 decades after the Construction Commission was first formed, staring down the barrel of the CFMEU corruption that had made Ned Kelly look like a gentleman. It's just like living in the next instalment of Back to the Future. And don't sit back tonight thinking that this doesn't affect you. Because unless every member of your family owns their own home and every member of your family doesn't use public transport, I bet you London to a brick that it does affect you, with the excessive and increasing cost of construction in this country directly attributed to unions all taking a clip. And you, the taxpayers, are footing the bill. Case in point is Jacinta Allen's Victoria. And if it wasn't for the current ICAC investigation into corruption within the New South Wales Liberal Party, you'd be seeing this as a daily national news story par excellence. And it deserves to be. We just can't let it slide by thinking it's the Australian way. That is, unless, of course, we want us to descend into the type of banana republic former Prime Minister Paul Keating was leading us to. How is it that we have Labor governments so hell-bent on beating their own drum about law and order, trying to outdo Conservatives on the fight against criminals and white-collar crime, and those who want to betray the campaign for social justice, and yet corruption in the union movement and its murky relationship with the criminal underworld appears to be immune from attention? Decent-minded, patriotic Australians shouldn't accept this state of affairs. We must maintain the rage, because I don't think Pop would be laughing right now.
It is a blight on this country. Well, over in the US, a row has unfolded in the Women's Basketball League after Indiana Fever player Sophie Cunningham dared to suggest that biological men shouldn't be competing in women's sport. Whoa, I know, it's a revelation, isn't it? But as expected, the left are going after Cunningham and the WNBA, prompting Minnesota Lynx coach Cheryl Reeve to rock up to a match wearing a T-shirt reading, "Trans kids belong." And so now a number of other coaches have desperately come out spreading the message of diversity. Here's Giggle for Girls CEO Sal Grover.
Sophie Cunningham said something that should not be controversial. The Indiana Fever guard told ESPN she wants to protect young girls in the locker room and in sport from having to compete against biological men. Then she doubled down. It's common sense. Love everyone, but protect biological women. The reaction was immediate. Boos, protests, shirts, media pylons. Cunningham has refused to walk it back. It's a bravery that hasn't been seen as often as it should. But why does this even need saying? Because men, specifically men who claim to be women, are competing in women's sport. Object to this and prepare to be called a bigot. Question: why do people think women's sport exists in the first place? Seriously, why do people think anyone bothered to fight for the right to and then create women-only leagues? Do they think women's sport is just some optional social club, an event where we can have some fun and then paint each other's nails and braid each other's hair at the end of it? Or any other tied stereotype that treats women athletes as decoration, not the talented athletes they are? Women's sport exists for two concrete reasons: safety and fairness. The performance gap is real and measurable. Just to use the 100-metre sprint as an example, the women's world record is 10.49 seconds. The men's is 9.58. The boys' is 9.92. Every year, dozens to hundreds of high school boys in the United States alone run faster than the fastest woman in history. If you put elite female sprinters into an open field against competitive teenage boys, they do not win medals. They often wouldn't even reach the final. That is not an insult, it is reality. Men and women are different physiology, different strengths. Acknowledging the difference is respect. Denying it robs women of the very category that makes their achievements possible. In Australia, we have almost no big-name athletes willing to say this out loud. not because they fail to understand the biology, but because they have seen what happens to people who do. The defence of women's sport has been left to amateur athletes and ordinary women who then face the consequences. Look at the Flying Bats in the North West Sydney Football Association. That league runs men's, women's and open categories. Men who identify as women are choosing the women's team instead of the open one. Women who object have been threatened with punishment. One player has been benched for simply speaking up. Kiralee Smith started drawing public attention to this in 2023. A court later ordered her to pay $95,000 to two males competing in the women's competition and to post a court-written apology to her social media. She was punished for stating reality. We're told males must play in women's sport for inclusion and equality, but it is not equality to punish women for objecting. And it's not inclusion for women either. Every male who takes a team spot or a lane excludes a female. He does not even need to win. His presence alone means a woman has nowhere else to go and is therefore excluded. Let's think of one of the most iconic sporting moments in Australian history. Cathy Freeman's 400-metre gold at the Sydney Olympics in 2000. She won it in 49.11 seconds in front of a packed home crowd, an historical Australian moment. The slowest man to finish the men's 400-metre final of that same Olympics ran 45.55 seconds, more than 3.5 seconds faster than Freeman. We wouldn't have that moment if women's sport didn't exist. Women's sport exists so females can compete fairly and safely and have their own achievements. It is time for men who claim to be women to leave the women's category for the sole reason they are not women. If they want to be included, the men's team is right there.
I mean, is the WNBA exclusively for biological women or not? Because as Sal said, otherwise, what is the actual point of the league? Now, Europe is in a mess. Its open borders policy was exposed when 50,000 Moroccan migrants stormed into Spain. And over in the UK, the new PM claims he's got illegal migration under control, despite a rise in boats in just his first few weeks in office. Samara Gill is host of Triggered with Samara Gill on Talk TV.
Europe is at a breaking point when it comes to illegal immigration. Just in the past 2 weeks, since we got a new Prime Minister, the UK has seen over 2,000 illegal migrants come across the English Channel in small boat crossings. There are now mega dinghies the size of buses that can carry up to 165 migrants across the Channel at one time. And there is a human cost. Tragically, 3 women died last week trying to cross the Channel. Authorities claim all of them died of heart attacks. Now, tragic as that is, the chances of that happening are something like 1 in 300 million. We deserve to actually know what happened on that boat. Because in May of this year, 2 other women died crossing the Channel. The cause not known. Were they murdered? Are there dangerous people now in this country? We should know the truth about this. We deserve to know. And why is it always the women? As it stands, in the past 8 years, more people have crossed the Channel than stormed the beaches on D-Day. Well over 200,000 people, costing the taxpayer billions. Just look at what happened in the Spanish territory of Ceuta. Of course, Hollywood actor Javier Bardem shared an Instagram post blaming Israel for the over 50,000 Moroccan migrant men storming the Spanish territory. But for years we've been gaslit that concerns about border security are overblown, that talk of losing control is exaggerated. Then this, the people who pay the highest price aren't the politicians or the woke human rights lawyers or the judges who decide these people's claims. They're the migrants who drown crossing the Channel because of the false hope that left-wing governments have given them, the border communities that are overwhelmed overnight and communities in general where thousands of these migrants get placed, and the taxpayers who are left funding and footing the multiple billion-pound bill for these people. What happened in Spain should shatter the one comforting illusion that this is all under control. The public have lost confidence, and so has the rest of the world, in what a great country Great Britain once was.
Yeah, these leaders never learn. Coming up after the break, Labor's housing reforms go from bad to worse as young Aussies fall further into mortgage stress. And I'll play you a clip of comments I made on this network that activist group Get Up is now using in a social media ad, and I'll expose the irony of it. You won't want to miss the debrief next. Welcome back. Whatever happened to intergenerational equity? Remember that term Labor trotted out on repeat before the budget, which seems to have disappeared into the never never as people realise the promise of intergenerational equity was also in the never never. News24 contributor Louise Roberts has this editorial.
Labor says its controversial housing reforms are about giving young Australians a fairer shot at home ownership. You know, fixing that intergenerational equity, which is something they love to pat themselves on the back about. But getting these young Aussies into the housing market is only half the job. Keeping them there when the market turns is the part that matters. What good is handing someone the keys if you've also handed them all the risk? This week, those warning signs got more acute, and this infuriates me, especially as a parent of a 20-something potential home buyer. New data by Digital Finance Analytics, commissioned by News24, shows households at risk of mortgage default have surged 18% in just 3 months. Cotality says home values have recorded their steepest monthly fall since 2022, and we know mortgage stress is where forced sales begin. According to Housing Australia, more than 34,000 Aussies entered the market in just 6 months using the government's 5% deposit scheme. But with so little equity to begin with, these are the buyers standing closest to the cliff edge if prices keep falling. Meanwhile, respected economist Cameron Cushas says some recent first home buyers are already in negative equity. The opposition argues that a 10% fall would wipe out more than double the average deposit, exposing these first home buyers to a potential $2.2 billion equity hit. Labor, meanwhile, is adamant that its reforms on capital gains and negative gearing will improve affordability over time. This includes Deputy PM Richard Marles saying the slump had been, to use his words, overstated, and Social Services Minister Tanya Plibersek conceding that she probably should not have said there's never been a better time to be a first home buyer. But young Australians are not living in the long term. They are living in the market we have today. And if Labor encourages a generation to buy with almost no buffer, they also wear the responsibility when the ground starts shifting beneath their feet.
Now it is time for the debrief. I'd like to thank activist group Get Up for watching the late debate here on News24, Monday to Thursday at 10 p.m. Now, on Monday night's show, my co-hosts James McPherson, Kayla Bond and I engaged in a debate about whether or not it was appropriate for Pauline Hanson to ban the ABC, The Guardian and The Age from a press conference. She did this on the day when she announced her candidates for the upcoming Victorian election.
That democracy doesn't happen on the ABC at all.
Look, I don't disagree that democracy does not happen on the ABC. However, I believe it was wrong of her to ban certain sections of the press. I'm a big advocate for freedom of the press, even though I know the biased ones, like those three, are a disgrace to Australian media. But not even Donald Trump bans what he calls the fake news from his press conferences. He takes them on and he debates them. And I actually think it makes for great viewing because he can obliterate them when they come up with their biased fantasies. And I believe Pauline Hanson can and should do the same. This is where Get Up comes into it. The group took a clip from the segment on the late debate and used my words as part of a social media ad titled Sky News host, should of course be News24, goes off the Murdoch script and actually says the truth for once. OK, what happens if the Greens were holding a press conference and they said we don't want anyone from News24 on coming to this press conference because we don't agree with their views? We would have an absolute field day on this channel with it. It would be the greatest fodder we've ever had. Yep. It's exactly the same for The Guardian, The Age and the ABC. The caption on the video reads, "Guys, it's finally happened. Timu Fox News has finally said something we agree with. Mark this day on your Gregorian calendar." Now, I stand by what I said. You can't have it both ways. if any of our journalists at News24 were barred from a press conference, we would make it the story. Now, I don't care what GetUp does, but what struck me were the comments on that video, and many with a very similar theme about me. One read, "Yep, I bet she lost her job," which indicates how low lives the people that work at Sky News, they work for the money, know the integrity of news reporting or even journalism for that matter. Another reads, "Too bad she's going to get fired, but at least she spoke out about the double standard. Good on her." Another, "She won't be working there for long." More, "The co-host is boiling inside at her going off their script. She'll be demoted now." Another, "They'll probably fired her the next day." "Someone is going to be at Centrelink on Monday." And finally, this perler, "She'll be sacked within the week. Lol." Well, surprise! I'm still here. I made it through the week. Shock horror. I haven't been sacked. I'm not in the queue for Centrelink, and I haven't gone off script, believe it or not. Why? Because there is no script. Because they are my own views. I am lucky I work for an organisation where diversity of opinion is encouraged, unlike the left, who assume I'd be sacked for engaging in a robust debate. And the reason I wanted to bring this up was for that reason. The left don't know how to engage in debate. They avoid it and try and cancel those with opposing views. We see it weekly. Women like Sal Grover, who we just had on the show, are lambasted by the left for taking a stand on the trans issues and daring to even know what a woman is. Pauline Hanson is called racist for daring to talk about mass migration. Remember when Green Senator Maureen Faruqi took her to court for the piss off to Pakistan comments? Don't even get me started when it comes to talking about Islam. Oh, and don't even dare bring up whether climate change exists. I could go on and on. Now, notice a theme. It's all when it comes to conservative voices, but the left hate a debate. They'd rather shrill away, silence their enemies and dodge any and all robust intellectual pushback. How funny that they joke about me losing my job for expressing my honest, held opinion, and they presumably think that's a bad thing when they're usually the first to demand people be sacked for saying things they don't like. Newsflash, having a debate and an opinion means it's okay. It's okay to have different views and a contest of ideas. The assumption that I, as a conservative woman working for a conservative station, would actually get sacked for having an opinion that the left believes is the only correct one is farcical. They ought to clean up their own backyard before looking at someone else's. But thank you to GetUp and its followers who are paying close attention to our work here at News24. I do hope you can tune in more often. That's all we have time for on Opinionated. Time now for the US Report with James Morrow. Good night.